All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, all you magnificent melonheads of the world. I hope you guys are well, and happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is December 3rd, 2024, and there's a lot going on this morning. And we started a little bit late this morning. I apologize for the late start. We had something kicked up just a few moments before we went live. South Korea, the president just declared martial law in South Korea. I did not have that on my 2020s bingo card, martial law in South Korea. Now, this story just broke a couple of seconds ago, so not entirely sure what's going on. Some cursory research on this. Apparently, the president in South Korea was already being investigated. He was at risk of impeachment. I don't know over what yet, but I do know that there was a rumor that he would initiate martial law as a way to avoid impeachment, and it looks like that's what he just did. Now, he's out on TV saying, hey, martial law, we're putting it in place in order to protect and restore democracy. You might want to look up the definition of martial law. I'm pretty sure martial law is kind of like the opposite of the whole democracy thing. I could be wrong here. Don't jump down my throat. But tanks are not an instrument of the democratic process. So, look, that's going on right now. Bitcoin reacted almost immediately to that. Shout out to my moderator, Mish, who was Johnny on the spot with that information this morning. So things are going on. The president of South Korea is a very crypto-friendly politician. So some crypto prices are falling rather dramatically on this news. More to hear about that. While we're on the subject of geopolitics, there's two other stories I wanted to mention that are worth keeping an eye on. Russian ships are leaving the ports in Syria right now. The Syrian city of Aleppo fell just a few days ago to what's being described as rebel forces. They're being described as Sunni jihadi rebels. I'm pretty sure we used to call them ISIS, but I guess we changed the definition now. I don't know. Are we slightly more friendly with them than we used to? So we don't use the I word anymore. Anyways, they're being backed by Turkey, who is our ally. The Syrian civil war is it's like trying to pick up Game of Thrones in the middle of season 5. You're going to be sitting there for an hour just saying, who's that? Whose side is he on? Who's that? Who's that? It's such a mess over there. But I can tell you, our guys are there. There are pictures of A-10s flying over Aleppo. We're the only ones who operate A-10s, guys. So our guys are definitely there. They're involved, as well as the Russians. It looks like the Russians are fleeing, and nobody has heard from the Syrian president. So who had that on their 2020s bingo? Last but not least, the Republic of Georgia, the country, not the state. There are widespread protests that have a violent flair to them. They're not outright fighting yet in the streets, but there are widespread protests in Georgia between pro-Russian and anti-Russian government and public factions going on there. Any one of these three stories, Syria, Georgia, and South Korea, has a potential to escalate this big geopolitical debacle that we have going on in the world today. And so, yeah, good luck with all that. Hey, leaders of the world, I just want to let you guys know what a fine job you're doing. No, really, I mean, you guys are just doing an awesome job with your martial law and your wars and everything else. So, good luck. I hope your slaughterings go really well. Keep up the good work. Okay, with that being said and all that shiny optimistic news, let's get into the big news of the day, the China trade war. China has returned fire. Yesterday, we were talking about how the U.S. had restricted the sale of semiconductor manufacturing equipment and high bandwidth memory chips to China. Today, China fires back. They are restricting the sale of rare earth metals to the United States. Things like gallium, germanium, tantalum, and tungsten, all things that are used predominantly in semiconductor and military applications, are going bye-bye. They're not going to be selling that to the United States anymore. So I guess we're going to have to dig up and mine this stuff ourselves and just wait until the people with the pink hair and the protest signs and the Campbell soup on the art and the super glue, wait until they have a say in that. It's just going to be wonderful. So we got the trade war heating up, also 2020's bingo there. Cargill is in the news yesterday. Cargill, that's actually the largest privately owned company in the country here in the U.S. They are an agricultural commodity giant. They're laying off 5% of their global workforce. That's about 8,200 people, predominantly in the United States, that are going to get laid off because of crashing agricultural commodity prices. Things like corn and soybean prices are way down because of bumper crops over the last few years. Those prices rallied dramatically in the lead up and immediate aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the prices have fallen sharply ever since. And on top of that, Cargill has made a lot of investments in the beef space, and the U.S. cattle herd is now the smallest it has been in several decades as ranchers are getting squeezed. So Cargill is taking losses there. That's one that is going to further weaken the job market, thousands of jobs going away. And Super Microcomputer was in the news yesterday. That stock rallied almost 30% yesterday. Why? Because the company investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing. A shocking turn of events. You might be amazed to learn that these crooks with a documented history of fraud hired somebody to come in and take a look at their books, and the people that they hired said exactly what they told them to say. Isn't that amazing how that works? They said, yeah, we took a look, and don't worry, all this stuff about, the ongoing Department of Justice probe and the Hindenburg short seller report. Shout out to the Orcafin, excellent work. And also, what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, Ernst & Young quitting, saying basically the management is a whole bunch of liars. Oh, yeah, none of that was true. Now pay us. And by the way, we need a new CFO. Wait, what? Yeah, in the same paragraph, they said we're replacing our CFO. We investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing, and that's why we need a new chief financial officer. Well, apparently that's enough for this market. That stock rallied 30% yesterday. Even Bridgewater, Ray Dalio's outfit, they revealed in their latest 13F that they had sold NVIDIA and piled into SMCI, piled into Supermicro. So this market will buy anything. It's amazing how many people bought into that yesterday. We investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing. Oh, I believe them. Let's buy the stock. Apparently, this market will literally buy anything. BlackRock is in the news this morning. They're getting further into private credit. They're buying HPS for $12 billion because they think the private credit market is going to double over the next few years. Just so you guys know, private credit, that is when people who aren't banks pretend to be banks and make loans that the government says the banks can't make anymore because it's too risky, because we don't want to have to bail you out. And so we're not going to let the banks make the loans. And so BlackRock says, well, we're not a bank and we've got everybody's money, so we'll make this loan. And let me ask you this, if these loans do go bad, if private credit ends up blowing up, do you think BlackRock's not going to get a bailout? Do you think PIMCO, do you think Apollo, do you think these groups are not going to get government bailouts? I mean, think about it. Basically, it's the same thing all over again. We're just calling it something else. Oh, it's not banks. It's private credit. The government says it's too risky for the banks to be involved in this stuff, but we'll go ahead and take these gigantic private equity firms, these gigantic asset managers who are essentially banks and have the implicit guarantee of the federal government, and we'll go ahead and let them make the loans, and the taxpayers will be left holding the bag if and when those loans go bad. More of that going on this morning. We got an earnings release from Scotiabank, the Bank of Nova Scotia. Now, they missed earnings. It wasn't that big of a deal. And normally I wouldn't cover this because it's like a mid-sized bank, but there was an interesting thing in their earnings report about an impairment charge related to their investment in a Chinese bank. We'll talk about which one. Might want to keep an eye on that. Further signs of weakness in China hiding in a Canadian bank's earnings report. And last but not least, we got General Motors is selling their stake in a battery plant that they had started as part of a joint venture. They're selling that for $1 billion. The automakers continue to readjust their position on electric vehicles, now dumping a share in an electric battery plant. But GM, considering everything going on in the auto market, yesterday we were talking about Stellantis CEO getting fired and Nissan's CFO abruptly resigning. GM has actually done pretty well through all this. That stock is actually up year to date, and it's doing all right this morning. We got a lot to talk about. Why don't we shrink my big melon of a head and let's see what's going on in this market. Don't forget that like button for the algorithm. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we do this every day. So come have your coffee with the melon heads as we go through markets. And right now, the S&P 500 is basically unchanged here. It's down 3%, 0.05 points lower. Not a whole lot happening. I would add right around 850 here when this big red started. That was right around the time the story of the martial law in South Korea broke. So it's possible that's having an impact on U.S. stocks here. The Dow, meanwhile, is down 6 points, 0.02%, barely moving on the Dow. And the NASDAQ is modestly lower by about 54 points, about 0.25% down. Again, the NASDAQ sell-off, that started right around 8:50 a.m. Eastern time, right around the story breaking of the martial law in South Korea. The U.S. dollar, meanwhile, is taking a break this morning, down a little bit here, 26 basis points at 106.19. That's after being up sharply yesterday. And looking over at the bond market, we've got the bond yields are lower across the board, albeit a small amount. The 30-year yield is at 4.357. That's down a fraction of 1 point. The 10-year yield, 4.179. That's down a point and a half. We've seen the 10-year drop quite a bit over the last couple of days here. Keep an eye on that. The 2 years at 4.153, down 4.5 points. And the 1 month T-bill is at 4.570. That's down 4 basis points. Looking over at the commodities board, we got a lot of green here on that weaker dollar and lower yields. We've got spot gold is at $26.52. That's up about $13, almost $14 here, 0.5% higher for gold. Spot silver, meanwhile, was very briefly there over $31, currently trading at $30.99. Come on, give me a 31 while we're live on the air. That's up about 49 cents or 1.6% higher. I like the shiny. Copper, meanwhile, is up 2.3% this morning. There's $31 for spot silver. All right, good job. Platinum down 1.4% today. Palladium is down 0.5%. I'm sorry, up 0.5%. Did I say down for platinum too? Sorry, platinum is up as well, guys. Pretty much everything is up here this morning. WTI crude oil, $69.12. That's up $1 or 1.5% here. And I got to stop saying down when I meant up. The dyslexia is really hitting me this morning. Now, let's look at Bitcoin here, down about $1,600 as priced on Coinbase this morning, $94,132. This is down about 1.8% from yesterday. I kind of drew this pattern a little bit before we started. It looks like a pennant pattern is taking shape here right around the high starting on November 22nd. We've been kind of bouncing around in this region. A pennant pattern is a bullish continuation. So if we break out of that, we would be probably heading higher. Now, we just touched the lower band of that pattern on this news from South Korea here. If we set this to minute candles, you can kind of see we did dip below that lower bound of that pennant pattern. We came right back above it. So watch that level. That's around 90, right around 93.9. Looking for that one to hold this morning. But the news in South Korea, this martial law, whatever it is, crypto definitely did not like it. If you set this to the minute candles, you can see here right around 8:45, 8:50, right around basically around the time frame that this story broke. We had a big drop in Bitcoin for several minutes after that. So we'll keep an eye on that story. Now let's talk about what's going on in China here. This one in Bloomberg just this morning. China targets critical metals in tit-for-tat response to the U.S. Beijing bans exports of germanium, gallium to the American market. And the move is a swift reply to Biden's escalation of tech curbs. Now, that's important to keep in mind here because the Donald has been making all the news with the tariff talk and the BRICS and the 100% tariffs and tariffs on Mexico. You get a tariff. You get a tariff. Biden has been getting in on the same action here. It was Biden yesterday who announced all these new curbs on semiconductors, and it is Biden that the Chinese are retaliating to, but that is going to continue under Trump, if not escalate. So it's important to keep an eye on this trade war. China announced an outright ban of exports of several materials with high-tech and military applications in a tit-for-tat move after U.S. President Joe Biden's government escalated technology curbs on Beijing. Gallium, germanium, antimony, and super-hard materials are no longer allowed to be shipped to America, the Ministry of Commerce said in a statement on Tuesday. Beijing will also place tighter controls on sales of graphite, it added. The U.S. has generalized the concept of national security and politicized and weaponized economic trade and tech issues, a ministry spokesperson said in a separate statement. It has abused export control measures and unreasonably restricted certain products' export to China. On Monday, the White House slapped fresh curbs on the sale of high-bandwidth memory chips made by the U.S. and foreign companies to China. That was the latest salvo in an intensifying campaign to contain Beijing's technological ambitions. China's response targets metals used in everything from semiconductors to satellites and night vision goggles. A Chinese export ban on gallium and germanium would deliver a $3.4 billion hit to the U.S. economy, the U.S. Geological Survey said in a report last month. So this is the latest in the trade war, guys. I'm sure it won't be the last. Rare earth metals are now going to be a hot commodity, or even hotter than they've been for a while. Now, also in the commodity space this morning, albeit a very different story, we got Cargill to cut thousands of jobs globally as profits shrink. The largest private U.S. firm will slash about 5% of its workforce, and most of the cuts will be made this year, the CEO said in an internal memo. Cargill Inc. is cutting thousands of jobs globally after the largest privately held company in the U.S. missed profit targets. The Minneapolis-based firm, the world's largest agricultural commodities trader, will cut about 5% of its 164,000-strong workforce as part of its 2030 strategy, according to an internal memo seen by Bloomberg. That's about 8,200 people. The reductions won't affect its executive team. Well, isn't that nice? But it will impact a number of next-level senior leaders, according to people familiar with the matter, who asked not to be identified because nobody identifies their sources. Cargill and crop trading giants such as, what is that, Bunge Global? Is that how you pronounce that one? Bunge Global and Archer Daniels Midland have seen earnings shrink after bumper crops sent corn and soybean prices tumbling. For Cargill, the squeeze has been compounded by the smallest U.S. cattle herd in 7 decades. The company has spent much of the past decade turning itself into the third largest beef processor. So tough things happening in the ag space, guys. It's a hard time for farmers. Those crop prices are way down. Of course, their prices and their interest rates are way up. You know, Cargill is a privately held company, so there's no stock affected by this. But I couldn't help but think of John Deere when I read this article. They sell a lot of agriculture equipment. John Deere is in Trump's crosshairs, in my opinion, because their decision to close U.S. manufacturing and move it to Mexico. And so I see a story like this. I'm thinking agricultural equipment suppliers are probably not going to be doing so well here. And another one, this is going to affect the jobs reports, which I believe we have another jobs report coming up at the end of next week. And in a story that had me shaking my head yesterday, Supermicro finds no evidence of fraud, but they're going to replace their CFO. Now, who'd have thought those two phrases could occupy the same headline? Let me ask you this, Supermicro. If you found no financial fraud, then why do you need a new CFO? One of these things is not like the other. The company seeks a new CFO, a new chief compliance officer, and a new general counsel. Okay, we're firing the CFO. We're firing the compliance officer, the guy whose job it is to make sure we don't break the law, and we need a new lawyer. But we found no evidence of any wrongdoing. And that was enough for this market yesterday to send the stock higher by almost 30%. Man, you got to love this stock market, guys. You have just got to step back and admire the beautiful stupidity of it all. It really is astounding. Supermicro said yesterday in an independent review of its business found no evidence of misconduct, but recommended that the server maker appoint new top financial and legal leadership anyway. A review by a special board committee alongside attorneys from Cooley LLP and forensic accounting firm Secretary Advisors found no evidence of misconduct on the part of management or the board of directors, and that the audit committee acted independently. All right, so a bunch of companies nobody's ever heard of who were hired by the board of directors said, hey, the people who hired us didn't do anything wrong. Okay, nice independent review you got there. Let me just add, guys, that this is not an audit, that they still have not filed their 10K or their 10Q, and that they are still under review by the Department of Justice. As a result of the findings, the committee recommended Supermicro install a new chief financial officer, chief compliance officer, and general counsel, it said in a statement. The board has instructed management to add additional experienced senior talent commensurate with the company's size and complexity today and to prepare it for its future growth. And also, let's make sure these guys aren't criminals while we're at it. I'm just going to throw that in. Hey, that's an important detail. Maybe put that right underneath education history, not a convicted felon, not a criminal, not a fraud. Just that's important stuff to put on your resume. May be applicable to you. Guys, look at what this stock did yesterday. Up 28.68%. The stock is trading at $42. This was a $17 stock a couple of days ago. Now, what has changed? They hired BDO as their new auditor, and they investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing. And the stock has nearly tripled in that time. And it's up another 3.5% this morning. They're still at risk of delisting. They are still months behind on their annual reports, and they're still under investigation by the Department of Justice. Good luck to everybody who bought this one yesterday. Congratulations, number go up. The company you own is a fraud, though, and they're going down. But good luck. I hope your fraud does really well, everybody. On top of that, we've got this one here from BlackRock, excuse me. Easy to get those mixed up. BlackRock, predicting a doubling of private credit market. BlackRock strikes a $12 billion deal for HPS. BlackRock on Tuesday said it had reached an agreement to buy HPS Investment Partners for $12 billion in a takeover that will give the world's top asset manager a leading position in the fast-growing private credit market. In a widely expected announcement, BlackRock said the agreement will see it buy HPS through an all-share transaction that will see it add another $148 billion to the New York Investment Fund's $11.5 trillion in assets under management. Too big to fail for a trillion, Alex. In explaining its rationale, BlackRock said it expects the value of the private credit market to more than double over the next 5 years to $4.5 trillion by 2030 as the result of an ongoing shift driven by market forces, technology, and regulation. The private credit market has grown rapidly since the 2008 financial crisis as banks have become more heavily regulated and new types of non-traditional lenders have taken their place using financing from investors, including pension funds, insurers, and sovereign wealth funds. And that last paragraph is so important. We don't let the banks make these garbage loans anymore because they're too risky, and we don't want to have to bail out the banks again. And so banks, you can't make these loans. Or if you do make these loans, you need to keep way more capital in reserve against those loans if you do. And so the banks are like, we're not going to do that. And then BlackRock says, well, we've got everybody's pension money, but we're not a bank. We'll make that loan. Well, if these loans go bad and they threaten to take down BlackRock, do you think BlackRock won't get a bailout from the government? Do you think PIMCO? Do you think Apollo? Do you think Blackstone? Do you think all these entities that are doing private credit, do you think they don't have the implicit guarantee of the United States government behind them? I mean, we bailed out freaking Heartland Tri-State Bank in flyover country, Kansas, after the CEO got caught up in a pig butchering scam and lost $140 million. You think they're not going to bail out BlackRock? This is exactly the same thing that happened pre-2008. They're just calling it something else, and they're doing it with our retirement money, with our pensions, and with our insurance. BlackRock stock up another 1% pre-market this morning, $1,030. That's up by $10. And speaking of banks, this one is actually a new bank, or not a new bank. It's actually a bank. Scotiabank misses estimates on expenses and charge for Chinese bank. Now, Scotiabank is not one I normally watch very closely, especially since they got out of the gold market not too long ago. But that Chinese bank, that one caught my attention this morning. Bank of Nova Scotia missed estimates as expenses came in higher than analysts expected, and the lender took a one-time impairment charge related to an investment in a Chinese bank. The Toronto-based lender earned $1.57 Canadian per share on an adjusted basis. That's lower than the $1.60 that was expected, so the bank missed earnings. Results included impairment charges of 379 million Canadian dollars. That's about 270 million US. And that was related to an investment in the Bank of Xi'an in China, as well as severance provisions of $38 million. So this Bank of Xi'an, I don't know how exactly to pronounce it. Guys, I went looking this morning. I don't have a lot of time before these shows kick off to really do research, but I didn't find much of any news at all about this Bank of Xi'an in China. But whatever's going on at this Chinese bank, it resulted in a $270 million hit to Scotiabank, or Bank of Nova Scotia's earnings. So obviously something at this bank is going majorly wrong, even though there's very little news. It's got to be related to this Chinese property bubble. And so, keep an eye on things over there. The Chinese property bubble, it's not over. China has started the stimmy thing. They're starting the helicopter money. They're taking their sweet time. There has been a lot of consolidation in the banking industry over in China. So whatever Scotiabank did at this Xi'an bank, it cost them a lot of money. And by the way, the Chinese consumer is also in bad shape. But Bank of Nova Scotia, all things considered, doing all right this morning, down just 1.09% here, trading at $56.15. And another one, keep an eye on here this morning. We have got GM to sell stake in battery cell plant to a joint venture partner for roughly $1 billion. GM is backtracking some of their commitments on electric vehicles here, recovering some of their money. Let's see. General Motors plans to sell its stake in a $2.6 billion electric vehicle battery cell plant in Michigan to its joint venture partner, LG Energy Solutions, the automaker said on Monday. The Detroit car maker said it expects to recoup its investment in the facility which a source familiar with the plan said is anticipated to be roughly $1 billion. The sale is part of a non-binding agreement between the two companies that is anticipated to close during the first quarter of next year. The nearly completed 2.8 million square foot plant in Lansing, Michigan, was expected to be the third battery cell facility of the joint venture known as Ultium Cells LLC, following plants in Ohio and Tennessee that have already been opened and are operational. The Lansing plant was announced in January of 2022, and the two companies first announced their joint venture 5 years ago. GM's move comes as the automaker attempts to right-size production of electric vehicles and confronts slower than expected consumer demand. And I just love how they always positively spin these things on CNBC. They're attempting to right-size production of electric vehicles. All positive phrasing, right-sizing, great. No, they're saying we're making too many of these things and people don't want them, so we need to get our butts out of the EV business. So we're going to right-size. In other words, we're downsizing. We're cutting our exposure to EVs, but they always have to put a positive spin on it. This also comes amid uncertainty regarding federal incentives for manufacturing and purchasing EVs in the U.S. under President-elect Donald Trump. It just goes to show you guys all this crap, all this EV bubble, and all these stupid Kathy Wood statements about electric vehicles. It was a cash grab for your tax dollars because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Green New Deal and all the money they were just giving out. They were just helping themselves to your tax dollars or your inflated away dollars that they stole via money printing. And now, of course, that those subsidies are drying up, you're left with a product that people don't really want. And so they're right-sizing production of electric vehicles. General Motors stock is up 0.25% this morning, $55.19 for GM. And last but not least, we got some initial numbers today. This is from Walter Bloomberg. This is basically a Bloomberg terminal printout here. Some initial numbers are coming in from Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Some interesting data points here. Shopify merchants got $11.5 billion in sales over Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. That's up 24% from a year ago. So very good news for Shopify there. Now, Shopify has been growing anyway. You have this ongoing shift from brick and mortar to buying online, and you've got a lot more of these brick and mortar stores are also doing point of sale using these fintechs like Shopify. So I don't think that up 24%, that's not to say the consumer spent 24% more money. It just means they used Shopify products for that spend. So I wouldn't draw any big macroeconomic conclusions from this data. And we also got this one, also a Bloomberg terminal print. Adobe Analytics says the consumers in the U.S. spent a total of $13.3 billion on Cyber Monday. That was up 7.3% year over year and surpassing Adobe's initial projection of $13.2 billion. So again, spending more money, growth year over year. Again, you've got this underlying trend of moving from brick and mortar to online. So you've got that going on. Still no clear data about how much Americans are spending overall in this holiday shopping season. And my gut tells me that means the numbers are not particularly good, because if the numbers were just okay, I think CNBC and Bloomberg would be shouting it from the mountaintop. Instead, we're getting nothing here. So again, we'll probably have more data in the days ahead. But right now, it looks like, at the very least, the trend of more shopping online, Cyber Monday, still very big, but no word yet about what's going on with Black Friday shopping. And I just want to say thank you very much, Mr. Charles Coughlin, who says, hoof-hearted, ice melted. I don't know. Did I say hoof-hearted, half-hearted? I don't know, but I'm glad the ice melted. I am not a fan of the colder months, Charles. So thank you for being a Melonhead for 6 months. Wow, you're a half-year Melonhead. Thank you, sir, very much. And I hope your hoof-hearted, ice-melting ways go very well for you. Thank you for supporting the channel, Charles. Thank you, Charles G. Says, wait. They sold NVIDIA for SMCI? WTF. That's right. That was in Ray Dalio's firm. Was it Bridgewater, Bridgestone? I forget the name of the firm, but I know it's Ray Dalio's outfit. They released their updated information. They didn't exit entirely, but they reduced their holdings of NVIDIA, and they bought a big stake in SMCI. I don't know either. I was shaking my head at that also yesterday. Anybody buying Supermicro right now, guys, you understand you're playing financial Russian roulette at that point, right? I mean, accounting irregularities, DOJ probes. Oh, they say they investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing. Well, I trust them. I mean, they only committed fraud 6 years ago and had to settle with the SEC for it. Why stop believing them now? Oh, they rehired all the people that quit or got fired after the last fraud, and so they're doing the same thing again. Oh, no, they seem like a trustworthy bunch of guys. Sure, take my money. That's what the market said yesterday. All right, guys, good luck. Good luck. Maybe it works really well. Or maybe just go to 7-Eleven and buy freaking scratch-offs. It's the same thing. It's not informed investing. That's for damn sure. Yeah, I was shaking my head at that one too, Charles. I don't get it, brother. But thank you, sir, for supporting the channel. And the beekeeper, thank you so much. SMCI's compliance officer will be very compliant. Oh, yes, most number one compliance officer ever. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a great guy. Yeah, this guy, what's his name? Scam, bank run, fraud is going to be our new compliance officer. He brings with him an extensive resume and a solid background. Is going to help us speed on our way to organizational excellence. Was there enough buzzwords in there, beekeeper? I don't know. Thank you very much. I agree. A new compliance officer, a new general counsel, a new CFO. But we found no wrongdoing, and that's why we need all these new positions filled, right? Okay. Okay. Good luck, market. I know. I can't believe it. Thank you so much, beekeeper, for supporting the channel. And Eduardo Garcia, thank you, sir, for the super chat. He says, maybe AI stocks will be scapegoats for a recession. Look, we're in a recession for 90% of the economy, and there are finally some articles like now, okay, the election's behind us. We can tell the truth now in the financial press. There are finally some articles that are saying, in hindsight, most people have been in a recession for the last 2 years. You know exactly what all those doomers have been saying this whole freaking time while CNBC and Bloomberg mocked us and said, oh, don't get your advice from randos and all that other shit. Yeah, now they're finally starting to admit most people have been in a recession since 2022. The only reason the stock market is not in that same recession is because they created this AI bubble in November of 2023 or 2022 when they unleashed ChatGPT. And ever since, this massive private credit, private equity funded bubble has emerged around us. It's all accounting frauds and gimmicks. And it's going to be spectacular when it blows. And by spectacular, I mean unbelievably painful for everybody in the country, because whether you realize it or not, guys, your retirement is now in this crap. And all I can say is I tried to warn people. That's all I did. I tried to warn people. So I good luck, everybody. SMCI found no wrongdoing. So maybe I've just been wrong about everything. That's entirely possible. Thank you, Eduardo, for the super chat, sir. I agree. They will be scapegoats for the recession. Kevin DeBella, thank you, sir, says Ed Dowd says 30 to 50% drop in 3 to 12 months. Agree. 30 to 50% drop in 3 to 12 months. That would be, that's a crash. That's like depression era crash. That's a pretty specific call. 3 to 12 months is also a pretty big time frame. Look, it's warranted. If the Fed were to refuse to turn on the tap again, if there were no bailouts, if there was no special purpose vehicle created to inject liquidity, if they stopped with all that BS that inflates the money supply and results in inflation, then yes, something like that, a 30 to 50% drop in 3 to 12 months would absolutely happen. Will they do that? Probably not. Probably not. My guess is they turn on the taps to avoid this scenario that Ed Dowd is calling for, and in doing so, create the next round of inflation. I think that is the more likely outcome here, Kevin. Both are entirely plausible. One is no action from the Fed. The other is the same actions the Fed has taken in the past. So I'm leaning towards the Fed takes those actions again in the future. But I can't say it's impossible. This whole market bubble, it's a $16 to $18 trillion bubble that has formed around AI. And it's an industry that, take away this narrative, what is it? Shitty chatbots that tell you to glue your pizza together. And people with 8 fingers. There is no value behind this shit. There really isn't. It's a productivity enhancing tool at best. Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate the super chat, sir. And thank you, Steve Wood. It says, does the REM ban from China, that's rare earth metals, not the band, does the rare earth metal ban from China also include the products they make with them and sell to the USA, or just the pure metals and concentrates? That is an excellent question, Steve, because most of those rare earth metals are used in semiconductors that are made in Taiwan that then get shipped to the U.S. So what will the actual effect of a ban of these specific materials to the U.S. mean? Well, it might put a damper on, say, hypothetically, Intel's plans to build a new chip fab in Arizona and Ohio, and I think there was another one. Was it in New York? Was the third one? I forget. But this could put a damper on Intel's plans. They're going to have to domestically source those raw materials if they want to make those chips here in the States. So I don't think it'll have any immediate impact on any U.S. production, but it will slow our drive to reshore chip production. That's for sure. Thank you very much, Steve. That is a very good question, sir. Appreciate the super chat. And Nashville Pasta Man says, trad banks and investment banks fighting for yield. That's what it is. I mean, they're basically yield chasing, Pasta Man. They're like, oh, lending into this sector is no longer allowed, and so the interest rates are artificially inflated in that sector. Sure, we'll loan people's pension money and people's insurance money over to these companies and collect that yield. Absolutely. The government came in and tried to fix the problem of risk in financial markets with a regulation, and all they did was create a new non-bank industry. Maybe it's almost like regulation isn't the solution to all the problems. It's almost like stop bailing them out. Stop with the freaking bailouts, and then they won't make these loans. The reason why BlackRock is doing that is they know the government has their back. Thank you very much, Pasta Man. And you're right, they are chasing yield, sir. Appreciate the super chat. Uncle Fedster says, almost a yearling. Been here for 8 months. Thank you. Thank you, Flag. That's a book reference. Yes, I've read a few books, guys. Thank you, Uncle Fedster, for being a member for 8 months. Lisa saying, hold my beer. I've been here for 9 months. Might as well join in. Keep it up, Jack. Thank you, Lisa, for everything you do for the channel. Hunt and Cover says, we're going to make you work today. I don't mind. Who's putting in work today? You got it, Hunt and Cover. Thank you for being a melon head for 9 months. You guys are showing your melons today. It's a family show here. Kids, cover your eyes. Hunt and Cover says, let's pay the man for his work. Thank you, Hunt and Cover. Appreciate the generosity. Appreciate it. But you know what? This is a personal growth story here. You know what? I can't call it work. I haven't worked a day since I started doing this. I put in a lot of work, but I don't call it work. I like what I do. Thank you, Hunt and Cover, for supporting the channel. Uncle Fedster, oh my God, just when I think I'm out there, pull me back in. Uncle Fedster says, Hunt and Cover made me do it. Well, thank you, Hunt and Cover, and thank you, Uncle Fedster. I appreciate that very much. I don't know what's going on in the super chats today. Not complaining. Thank you, Mish, for gifting 10 Nobody Special Finance memberships. So there's 10 more of you out there now. Guys, if you got one of those memberships, thank Mish for the donation. Mish, thank you for everything you do for the channel, as well as the awesome catching of that South Korea story this morning. While we were on the phone, Mish is briefing me on some of the stories that he found during the night. And then he's like, oh, by the way, martial law was just declared in South Korea. Bitcoin price is crashing. Wait, what? Yep. Mish, every channel needs a Mish, man. Thank you, Mish, for everything you do for the channel, brother. And thank you, M&J, who says so much dirt baggery. It is the golden age of fraud and the golden age of dirt baggery, M&J. I agree. The super micro story, though, that is just that dirt baggery coupled with stupidity equals super micro. I mean, that's what you get. I couldn't believe how many people bought into that stupid shit yesterday. A company with a history of fraud says we hired a company nobody's ever heard of to investigate us, and they found no wrongdoing, and therefore you should ignore the pending delisting of our stock. You should ignore our history of accounting fraud. You should ignore the Hindenburg and Orcafin report. You should ignore the DOJ probe. You should ignore the late 10K. You should ignore the late 10Q. You should ignore the fact that we need a new CFO and a new general counsel and a new compliance officer. Nope. We're all good here. Thanks. Buy our stock. And the market piles in. OMG. I could not. You're right. So much dirtbaggery and so much stupidity, M&J. I don't know where I'm going to keep it all. I don't know. I just don't know. Thank you for supporting the channel. And the Beekeeper, thank you for your 6-month milestone as a Melonhead as well. I appreciate that very much. And M&J says, hashtag dirtbaggery merch. I'm still trying to figure out how to make that work on a t-shirt, M&J. We're going to get those dirtbaggery t-shirts one day. I guess got to figure out, what do? We just put dirtbaggery on a shirt? I mean, you got to spruce it up a little bit, I'm thinking. I don't know. Rando kind of works on its own as a standalone. Dirtbaggery, that's a different one. Anyways, thank you so much, guys, for the generosity in the super chats. I don't know what came over my melon heads this morning, but you guys are awesome. I really appreciate that, as well as you magnanimous melon heads on Patreon and YouTube. Thank you guys for everything you do for the channel. I appreciate that very much. It was a crazy one today, guys. Keep an eye on those geopolitical stories. Syria, Georgia, and South Korea. We'll be hearing more from those. Thanks again, everybody. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I love you guys. Everybody, till next time, live small and dream big.